Hey, everybody, wherever you're watching me from, I first want to say happy Father's Day to all the fathers who are listening, those who are in your heart. If you are listening and you're not a dad, but you do know one, please extend just happy Father's Day anniversary, whatever. Let's do it today because it's a special day, especially if your father is still alive. It's a good thing because many people don't have that privilege. Many people have grown up without fathers, and we know what that has done to our society. So if your dad is in your life or in your kids' lives, that is a plus. Please say happy Father's Day. My name is Lisa Dublin, and on a Sunday, I do an interview with immigrants who are doing great things in the world. I'm based here in Edmonton, Alberta. And so far, I've interviewed people from many parts of Edmonton. Today, I have a guest who lives in Lethbridge, and his name is Clement Esene. I'm going to bring him on in a while, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about him first. So his story is when the system didn't make room for him, he decided to create his own lane. And what a story it is. It's something that I think all of us immigrants know instinctively, and we cheer on when we hear those kinds of stories, because honestly, it does reflect what we ourselves go through. And so Clement is the force behind the BIPOC Foundation out of Lethbridge here in Alberta. And he is working to uplift Black Canadians through entrepreneurship and access to opportunity. Now, his impact doesn't stop here. As I was saying this morning, the business side of him is as, I think, complicated and as like just out of this world as the BIPOC Foundation. And so, without any further ado, I'd like to bring on my guest today, Clement Esene, to talk about us. And we brought him on and the kids. Okay. How are you?
I'm doing well, Lisa. Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor
Man,
to be here.
absolutely. And we understand it's after all Father's Day. It's 12 in the afternoon. We are in the kids' space. So thank you for taking the time out to do this interview.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's begin with tell us a little bit about yourself and your origin story, I guess.
Right. Well, no, thanks. That's an amazing question. I grew up in Nigeria. I'm originally Nigerian, and in Nigeria, I was constantly surrounded by a culture of ambition.
Yeah.
We have a lot of ambitious people. Even in scarcity, people always find a way to create. That really shaped me in a way that I can't really put in words.
Hmm.
But I also grew up seeing how systems could either unlock or stifle potentials. you know not just on merit, but some even on the basis of access as well. you know I left Nigeria with the belief that Canada will offer a level playing field,
Hmm.
and I found myself instead, in a society that was full of opportunity, but there was invisible ceilings, especially for Black immigrants. When I arrived in Canada, I faced what a lot of newcomers would usually face, the
Hmm.
reality of unemployment, credential questions around, you know, can you
Competence.
transfer, are you
Mm.
competent enough, can you transfer your credential here? There was a cultural disconnect, obviously.
Hmm.
Something that a lot, these are everyday immigrant stories.
Hmm.
I had to relearn how to advocate for myself. It wasn't just about survival. It became about reclaiming agency and the ability to rewrite the narrative.
Hmm.
That's what fuels everything that I do today. My personal understanding of what it feels like to be overlooked despite having amazing potential. That's what drives me. That's what drives the work that I do. So, yeah,
Wow.
that's me in a
Okay.
nutshell.
Oh wow. That's I think that number one, it might trigger some people here because we all have lots of people have those kinds of stories. If I may, I know this might not be on our list of questions, but it just occurred to me, how come so many of us are coming with the notion that this is the land of equal opportunity? Where do you think that's coming from? Is it advertising? Is it what people say who have gone before?
Well, again, right? We grew up watching TV, right? And
Yes.
that was where movies and music videos is these were the things that shaped our vision of how the diaspora abroad looked like, you
Yes.
know.
Overseas.
So
Yeah.
and these were properly well curated stories, you know, to
Mm,
sell, you know, how things are here as, you know, a land of equal opportunities, you know, a land of freedom, you know. But when you get here, I think the opportunities are there. But again, like I pointed out before, the issue is on the access. You know,
access. Oh,
you
that's
know,
awesome.
there's also the disconnect in information, right? When people come here, there's you're probably a first generation immigrant, or at the most maybe a second or third generation immigrant. Aside from those black people who arrived here in the 1700s, but it's not wait. There's not a lot of them, you know. So when you're a first generation immigrant, it becomes that much more difficult for you to get access to that information.
Hmm.
And we're a very communal people. We kind of huddle together. And if you only huddle around people that know as much as you do, guess what? You're going to be discounted. You're not going to know where the real information is and where the real opportunities are. So
Okay,
that's
that's great. So, since we have begun speaking about access, let's talk about the things that we don't know. Where do you think? Because I love the point of view. You're not saying that there are not many opportunities. I love the point of view that it's not the opportunities, it is the access to these opportunities that is standing in our way. Can you talk a little more about that? Like, where are these barriers as far as you see and know?
right. Well, again, I'll take a couple of pointers. There's tons of them, right?
Hmm.
Um, I'll tell a little story. You know, a little while ago, while I was very early on, you know, in my nonprofit journey,
Hmm.
pitching a program to support Black entrepreneurs to these organizations, the feedback that I got was, "Is this really necessary?" You know,
Oh,
and that question really hit me hard. You know, because it's not really because the question was asked; it was because that it seemed like they really believed it. You know, and again, this is not the first time I've heard that before. You know, it made me realize how much data, you know, how much evidence and how much storytelling would be needed, you know, just to prove that our work was valid. You know,
wow.
it was a defining moment, because at that point, you know, I stopped asking questions and I said, well, it was time to build with conviction. You know, you need to build this thing. You don't need to ask anybody for questions, right?
Okay.
Another memory, you know, it's a little bit more personal to me, and I'll count this as the reason why, you know, one of the main reasons why I do, you know, what I do is when I first became a father, and I will use the opportunity to say Happy Father's Day to, you know, all the amazing fathers around the world.
Hmm.
I remember holding my son and thinking, well, everything that I do now isn't just about impact. You know, it's also now about inheritance. You
Yeah.
know, what am I going to leave
And
for my son?
legacy, right?
You
Yeah.
know, what am I going to leave for my family? You know, not just financial, but there's now a spiritual connection as well. You know, there was
Yeah.
a cultural connection, and then there was a communal connection, because my child will have to grow up in this community, right?
Hmm.
There are broken systems. You know, there are a lot of stereotypes, you know, out
Hmm.
there, right? So what role should I play in this community to change some of these stereotypes? Because what kind of world do I want to leave for my children? You
Hmm.
know, is it the same world where, you know, we complain a lot today, or is it a world where the children would be left with a much more evolved, and don't have to have the same arguments and conversation, you know, that we have, you know,
Hmm.
today? Is it a world where they have to shrink to fit in,
Yeah.
or, you know, a world where they can really own the space? You know, and this is what drives me. It's not just pushing for my generation. It's
Mhm.
to set up standards that can work for generations to come.
Okay. And we just want to remind our audience that it is Father's Day, and we do have, is your baby 5 months? Is it a 5-month-old baby
No,
or 11 months?
I have an 11-month-old and a
11
5-year
months,
old. Yeah.
right. So y'all, big grace today for both of us. I'm fresh off coming out of the kitchen myself. So,
Right,
I mean,
right.
we understand it's in the middle of the day. It's something you said that was so interesting before we bridge into talking about the BIPOC Foundation. And I hope we get into your amazing company as well. Like, I need to know more about it. Just tell us what exactly is it? I don't even understand it so well. I'd love to. Something you said about when you realized people were asking the question of, is this very necessary? Not as if it was a question, but as if there was already a pre belief. And you said then we needed to have stories and we needed to have data. When you set out to do the BIPOC Foundation, did you find the data? Did you go on based on what you found or the dearth of it? And yeah, how is that playing a part in what you do with the foundation? That's so amazing to have said that.
No, that's an interesting question. Again, there's a few things that have happened within the last decade that have really, I want to say, springboarded, the things that we are now seeing, and what is now cascading. Talking about data, there was very, very limited, and there is still very limited
Yes.
data today, right? Like, you
Mhm.
want to go to StatScan, there's not a lot of data available, and this data has not historically been collected,
Mhm.
right? Obviously, first off, a few years ago, just a little bit more than a decade ago now, I'd say, the United Nations launched something called the United Nations
Yeah.
Decade of People of African
Yes.
Descent.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
so that was the first real opportunity, to get countries around the world, to connect with the African diaspora, that are resident in those communities. And Canada happened to be one of the signatories
Yes.
of that commitment. And it took a few years, for Canada to really now key in and start to try to create opportunities for the Black communities that live here. And obviously, with the continuous craziness that happens, our brothers over the border, and the issue, with George Floyd, and how all that inequality became very, very evident on how Black folks were treated as
Mhm.
against other folks. It's a little bit more subtle, in Canada, but it's still
Yeah.
there. I've experienced it firsthand.
Mm.
People experience it every day in their workplace. And this is unconscious bias that we're talking about, right? A lot of these folks that act a little bit differently to other people is sometimes it's not because they want to. It's just something in their mind, that makes that happen. So it's unconscious, but it's true. People tend to navigate or gravitate towards people that look like them, people that have same
Absolutely.
characteristics with them, people that and they have same commonalities with,
Yes.
and these are all fundamental human attributes, but
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
it's really it really cascades, or it really
Mhm.
becomes bigger when people when prejudice is infused into that. So back to the conversations around data. What we've done over the past few years is to intentionally gather those data to
Mhm.
allow us, and listening to the community. We've done several surveys, and as we are engaged in the community, we're gathering data and then administering surveys that allow us to build not just for the community, but build with the
The
community, because
community.
we need to build for us, by
Mhm.
us. I think that's very important.
Okay, that's a great question. A great answer. Thank you for that because it shows that you really seem to have a mind, not for just what you experience, but a heart for your people, like Black
Yeah,
people. So that that is
yeah.
quite evident. So let's go now to the work of the BIPOC Foundation. I had a look at the website, and it seems that lots of great things are happening. Can you tell us what it's about, how long it has been in existence, and yeah, all of the deets.
Right. No, BIPOC Foundation,
Mhm.
again, it's an organization that's emanated from our story. Just like I said before, there was there was a real need to provide a platform that could, push for economic empowerment, financial inclusion, and representation, for the community, where people can see themselves, or see successful people as role models, where we can intentionally build role models, that our kids, can
Mm-hmm.
look up to, where we can intentionally build successful business owners that can spur other people to say, well, I want to do business, where we can become a sustainable community, self-sustainable community, instead of just a participatory community,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's lots of communities out there that have different models that they have successfully, done. So again, it started up as a simple meetup group,
Oh wow.
friends,
Okay.
friends and friends of friends, asking each other, how
And
are
this,
you doing?
yeah, and this is in Lethbridge.
Well,
This was.
it's funny enough, it first started in Calgary because we used to live in
Oh,
Calgary before we
all
moved over
right.
to Lethbridge. And then
Okay.
it continued even while we moved here, right? And then the COVID, gave the opportunity to move things from meeting at a friend's living room on a Sunday to, meeting virtually, right? And that was the origin of it. It
Okay.
was really just to ask each other who are interested in doing business or who do business, what challenges are you facing and how are you solving them?
Oh
Have I
wow.
faced similar challenges and how did I solve it? Will it help you? And then just sharing those tips and tricks, that allowed us to continue to help each other grow a business. And that's what cascaded into getting the registered organization out back in 2020,
Yeah.
and essentially getting to the point where we got that federal investment under the Black Entrepreneurship Program,
Mm-hmm.
that allowed us to cascade. And our mandate under that program was to create a business accelerator program that served Black entrepreneurs across Western Canada, so BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, that's the story, origin story of BIPOC Foundation in a
Okay.
nutshell.
And Clement, I remember in one of the conversations we had, you were saying that the BIPOC Foundation was one of the few, I think, charitable foundations that got the Western Canada mandate, something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. So that makes it broader, right? That you need to service, well, all of Western Canada as opposed to just one area. Is that what it means?
Yeah, I mean, we're a national nonprofit,
Mm-hmm.
but under the Black Entrepreneurship Program mandate, which ended last year, right?
Mm.
We were the only organization that I believe had that mandate. A lot of the other organizations got, some got the prairies, some got just
Okay.
BC, some got just Alberta. There were a
Mhm.
few out of the east that got a couple that got national mandate, but
Oh,
our own mandate was Western Canada. So we
mm.
got to work from, do a lot of in-person road shows, in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And where we stand out really is not just to focus on the urban communities, because we're rural based, right? We're
Mhm.
based in Lethbridge, so we're very
Yeah.
adamant about ensuring that the rural communities are not left out in the equation of opportunity. So
Oh,
we
wow.
really focus on getting into those rural communities and ensuring that Black folks over there are
Mhm.
connected to the resources that are available in the ecosystem.
So in my little narrow world, when I heard that you were in Lethbridge doing this kind of thing, I was like, is there a big Black community in Lethbridge? Can you answer that question for me?
Well, we've got a decent and fast growing
Mm,
community out here in Lethbridge. I can tell you
yeah.
that for sure. When I first moved here about 6 years ago, there was just a handful of us, and we
Mhm.
knew each other, right? But I
Mm.
can tell you now that where it used to be, maybe I know one out of three people that I see. I can tell you that it's grown to maybe I know one out of 12.
Oh, wow.
That's how fast it's grown, pre and post COVID. Post
Mm.
COVID, even more so. A
Okay.
lot of folks have moved out here. I can tell you that here in Lethbridge, just on the one front, they give you this data.
Mhm.
More than 30% of the medical doctors in Lethbridge are not just blacks; they are Nigerians. So there
Oh,
are other
wow.
black doctors here that are not even Nigerians. But this is
Okay.
just that's how much I think that's a good indicator to tell you how fast people are moving out here. The community is growing.
Yeah. And I think it also bears testimony to how fast the Nigerian community is also growing, in this part of Canada as well.
Yeah. Yes.
So first wave, I think for immigrants, it was the Caribbean people who came, and now it really does seem that there's this burgeoning of African peoples from the continent. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about achievements now in terms of the major achievements of the BIPOC Foundation, and then we can talk about the way forward.
Oh, yeah, no, thanks. That's a fantastic question.
Hmm.
Over the past few years, we've been able to, directly support thousands of entrepreneurs, across, obviously, again, remember, our mandate, Western Canada, even though we also have a lot of entrepreneurs that are using our services from out east,
Oh,
yeah, up to Toronto, Quebec.
wow.
Last year we got to do an in-person, session out in Prince Edward Island. So
Hmm.
we really go around, touching these places, right? We've seen a lot of businesses, move over from side hustles, to mainstream registration, because that's part of what we do. We want to be able to take a look at your growth. How are you doing?
Yeah,
What are the opportunities that are available to you as a business owner if you keep working under the table as a side hustle,
yeah.
or if you get registered, and then connect you with those opportunities. And there's quite a bit of people that I've seen, that are now transitioned into mainstream business, registered.
Hmm.
We saw people got their first grant, we saw companies hire their first employees, we saw, companies that have been selling locally begin to think about export. What
Wow.
other countries out there, can we export our products to? We we saw through our different program. I was our last gala. We have an annual entrepreneurship award and gala.
Mm.
I was sitting in that room and I heard somebody say that I would never have seen myself or thought that I could have ever started business in Canada if not for BIPOC Foundation. And that really, really, really touched me. And
Yeah.
today, she has a thriving business, with
Wow.
restaurants, kick off in community where there were no African restaurants before,
Mm.
and we've seen quite a bit of capital mobilized. I want to say, just cumulatively, there's around $5 million of primary capital mobilized, and obviously there is secondary and tertiary capital that we did not,
Mhm.
I can't quite that has now been catalyzed from those primary capital that was mobilized. We've seen our first, a tech company take up VC investment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Hmm.
in this space, and it's a health tech company, right? But beyond the numbers, I want to say that our greatest achievement
Yeah.
is trust, because we have a very amazing community, and the number one commodity, and which I think is a very expensive commodity within our community, is trust. To be
Yeah.
able to build community trust, and to be able to see organic growth,
Hmm.
of an organic, alignment with,
Yeah.
community members really coming to us. I think it really resonates deeply, with me. Trust with institutions who look at us,
Hmm.
to bridge the gap. We believe that we were successfully able to launch a culturally responsive venture membership model, and we've had the opportunity to advise, policymakers. We created some sector specific accelerator and bespoke programs
Hmm.
that meet entrepreneurs where they are. Not just building for the entrepreneurs again,
Hmm.
working with them and finding out where you are in your business journey and starting from there to continue to, to give those very bespoke support. And this is just some of the things that we've seen that we think are massive achievements over the past few years.
Okay, so is the foundation still in? Is it still in operation, as in funded? What's the next step for that? I'm so sorry. Before we continue, it's something you said that I we have to talk about a little more. That you said in our community, the biggest commodity is trust. You sound so much like Levar. I'm sure you know who that is, the founder
Yeah,
of Think.
I know Lever very well, my
And
good friend.
oh, absolutely. And he one of the things that is the basis, I think, for the Think community and why we meet and learn together and support each other's businesses is for the building of this trust factor. Can we talk about that a little bit, Clement? Because for example, you came from a situation where you said, okay, those doors are not open, those tables, I don't get a seat at those tables, I'm building my own table. Basically, I'm making it better for myself and for my people. How instrumental were your people in that journey? I want to talk about the trust factor here.
Well, trust again is significant, right?
Mm,
And there is so many levels to it, right? Think about what people have had to go through, where they come from. We come from very different places. Some people come from, great affluence and wealth and, richness of the society. Some other people come from the opposite,
yeah.
and then we come from, there are communities globally where there's still caste systems that are available,
Yeah.
and people, have come from very intense trauma, right? People have come from war-torn regions, to be assimilated here, and they're now trying to, understand how to live and thrive in a brand new community. My father often says, when a chicken gets to a new land, it stands with one foot, right? So, and it's the same here,
Yeah.
right? So when immigrants first come here, there are a lot of them are in survival mode, right? And what that breeds is, okay, well, who can I trust? And when 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 we have such in a community, you have to lead with excellence, right? As a community organization like BIPOC Foundation and other amazing ecosystem partners out there that are doing the work and that are working and fine tuning and for impact, real impact,
Yes.
you need to lead with excellence, right? And
And so that way
one,
you attract all sorts
you
of
can
people and
exactly, you need to be
yeah,
consistent with the
yeah,
work that you're
absolutely.
doing. People need to know what to expect when they come to you, because once trust is broken, that becomes very, very difficult,
And sorry,
to
if I may, once trust is broken, we fall back into the stereotypes, right?
absolutely,
Black people again. Yes, those people
absolutely,
again. Yes.
and the truth is, to be quite frank, this may be tough to hear, but a
Mm.
lot of folks out people don't expect us to be excellent from
And we
day one,
don't, yeah, and we
right?
don't
But
expect it from
we,
each other.
we don't expect, most of the time, we also don't expect excellence from each other. But it is crucial that with every opportunity, you lead with excellence as an individual, in your home, as a parent, as you're celebrating our Father's Day today. You have to be excellent, because guess what? You have your kids watching. As a community organization, we have to be excellent. Guess what? Because it's not, we don't just have the community relying on us, we also have our partners who are supporting us, needing that excellence for us to continue to close the gap for our community. And when that goes away, it doesn't just affect us as an organization, it affects an entire community. And as an organization who is particularly advocating for rural communities across Canada, it becomes even more imperative,
Mhm.
that these are not just underrepresented communities, but also communities in underserved region.
Yes.
So it becomes particularly more important
Ooh,
to be excellent.
thank you. You were very, very earnest about the excellence bit there. You were very, I think the little bit of the coach in me is coming out there. Like you were just so earnest about leading with excellence. So I imagine that is a great feature of, what you do offer within the BIPOC Foundation.
We'll try to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was very, very evident. Let's go to another question now about how do you make this sustainable? We know that there are grants for a lot of our Black charities and that kind of thing. Some of them are running out. How do we make these kinds of movements sustainable and scalable?
Right. No, that's a fantastic question, by the way. We're talking infrastructure here, right? The kind of work that we're doing, it's not just short term. And if you're not solving for short term issues, you have to use, you can't use short term packages. You can use
Yes,
short term
methods, eh? Yeah,
methods to
yeah.
solve long term issues, right? So grants, are short term. So we have to begin to shift from small grant focus to building those platforms. Real support systems require long-term capital. They require policy alignment. They require ecosystem collaboration.
Mm,
It's not just about giving someone a fish, or maybe teaching them how to fish. It's about ensuring that they have access to not just the pond, but also the pool, the tools that they need, and then
yeah.
the market that they need to sell that fish by the time they fish, right? So, some of the things that we're doing here at BIPOC Foundation is designing, modular service model, that can scale, across region,
Mhm.
embedding and appreciating, in the world of AI, appreciate embedding tech, and automation into what we're doing, so that we can track, and personalize the support that we offer, to the folks that come through our doors. We
Mhm.
have to streamline service delivery, and convening unlikely allies, and that back to that partnership.
Yes, yes.
Partnership is crucial. You can't just, we know that we're building for us by us, but you can build in an ecosystem without the support structures that exist. People have
Yeah.
been doing this for 100 years, and more, right? You
Mhm.
need to be able to tap into the system, and then within us, we need to be able to collaborate, and bring in those grassroots structures, and project shared goals,
Right.
shared values, so that
Mhm.
we are not just building independently or building in silos, but we are building together for community good.
Now, so when we talk of community growth, there's a question that I often think about whether the preoccupation of us Black people, do you think it's ever going to evolve into like a world view? Not us in the world, but the world as itself, because we might get to the point where we have solved for the trauma of slavery, the trauma of just the injustice of Black people. Do you think we'll ever get to a point where we are just like thinking just of everybody because perhaps like we've solved home? I know it's a like whimsical question, but it's one I think about, like our place in the world.
No, I like that thinking, and as I like to call myself Africa's optimist in chief.
Hey,
As
AOC, another
yeah,
AOC.
right. As an unapologetic optimist,
Uh-huh.
that's the world that we want, that we look forward to. But
Yeah.
the world in itself is a mystery, which means that we need to solve for it every day.
Mm-hmm.
There is never really a destination. It's always a work in progress. As long as we continue to push in a positive direction,
Yeah.
you know, um, we need to continue to, build towards that world where it gets to a point in time where it doesn't matter whether you're black, it doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
whether you're indigenous, it doesn't matter whether you're a person of color, it doesn't matter whether you're male, it doesn't matter whether you're female. Now, sitting here, can I tell you that there is a realistic time, maybe Vision 2050, where this will happen?
Okay.
I would,
No,
I can't say that, but I
yeah.
think that, as the world continue to advance, the black folks or Africans, or wherever
Yeah.
we are,
Yeah.
in the diaspora, we just need to continue to leverage technology, and then beyond artificial intelligence, leverage emotional intelligence as well,
Yeah.
to be able to build our community, to be able to band together, and
Mm-hmm.
then figure out, a way to ensure that we're, building a bridge that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't just cut across us, but also cuts into the continent and into the Caribbeans, and ensuring that as we're developing ourselves here, we are able to give back, because that is the only way that we can carry people and offer the ladder for others to climb as well, so that we can create a level playing field.
Love that. I want to stay on the inspiration part for a little while. That's like the main main jam. Let's put it that way. And hearing you speak clearly, somebody who's been thinking very deeply about systems and thinking ahead of what it will take to kind of craft something that works and that is viable for Black folk here in Canada. It can be a bit overwhelming, but what brought me right back to something manageable was to realize that we all have our little part to play in whatever sphere we find ourselves. And I think that perhaps is a message for anybody listening here today who's hearing like, what can I do? If I may just turn the lens on this program for a bit, one of the things I've realized, I've always been very conscious. I'm from the Caribbean. I'm from St. Lucia in the Caribbean. And because of how I was brought up, where I went to school and what I was exposed to, I've been very appreciative of my African roots. So I've always grown up with that duality of, yes, I'm from the Caribbean, but do you know who my ancestors were? Right?
Yeah.
So I come here, and the way that this it distills into what I do is to, like, even with this little show, it's just about, okay, I have African people, I have people from the Caribbean as well. And I always try to straddle one week, someone from the continent, one week somebody from the archipelago. Bring in the variety that we might see ourselves in each other and be more appreciative of who we really are, because I've had this conversation a lot, especially with my African sisters, about some of the divides that exist. And I'm like, no, we just need to spend more time with each other and come with open minds. And like this show is put together in the hope that we can accomplish something like that. So just to say to anybody who's listening and might be overwhelmed by, oh my gosh, it's not a scorched earth kind of world. It really isn't. There's hope, and I think like every single person has a voice and a mission where they can make an impact. So I thought I'd add that in there just to add to your understanding of African, what's it, African operation. What did you say you were AOK?
Oh, it says Africa's optimistic chief.
I love that. I just absolutely love that. Thank you for
Right.
saying that. Yeah. Look, just before I don't want to keep you too long because it is Father's Day and the kids are, yeah, we hear them. So
Right.
what bold idea or possibility excites you most about the future? That's the first one. And secondly, how do you see yourself contributing to that bold idea or possibility?
No, amazing question. First off, I'm gonna say that I want to see a community here in Canada. First off, because this is our primary constituency. Where we we're building big, bold businesses,
Yes.
big, bold institutions, that are serving our community, and big, bold, sustainable, infrastructure, that are really, developing a community that the community is tapping into, that is giving to the community, and the community is giving back to it.
Mm,
That's what I want to see. And how do we get here? I'm incredibly excited about the intersection of, artificial intelligence, economic inclusion, and an area that, it's very, very traditional to us, but we
mhm,
haven't quite tapped into it yet, which is
mhm.
community finance, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
right? Because we have a lot of, well-to-do, folks within our community, either as professionals, but there is this individuality,
Mhm,
in the way, we represent in the community. And I'd love to see a shift from individuality to collectivity, which is what our roots really represent, as
yeah.
Black folks,
Mhm,
where we can aggregate our wealth,
mhm,
and then pull it, and leverage that aggregated wealth,
mhm,
for community growth. I believe the future lies in, decentralized platform that allows, every everyday people to invest in projects, people, places, wherever they are, from anywhere in the world. I imagine, a rural entrepreneur in Ghana building systems that allows, a rural entrepreneur in Ghana receive investment from, well-meaning family offices, because we would
mhm,
have that level of maturity. We want to have matured family office, Black-owned family offices here that
mhm,
would invest not just in entrepreneurs here, but also invest in entrepreneurs in, like I said, in Copenhagen and in the continent.
mhm,
You know, but I see myself, as a bridge, building legacy systems and future tools, between tradition and transformation. And I want to help design the rails that make equitable economies possible. And this is not a one man's job, right?
Right.
It's something that we all have to tap into,
Mhm.
as a community, because we need to scale trust, we need to scale justice, we need to make sure that no one is left behind, in our community, but we are all positioned to lead again, lead with excellence.
Okay. All right. So I have to tell you. So I'm a communicator, right? So I'm gonna challenge you a little bit, Clever, because
Right.
like if that sounds nice and big and bold and everything, just in one sentence, like where do you see yourself fitting into this? Break it down for the average person like me. Like in one sentence, Lisa, this is what I see is gonna happen, and this is what I want to do.
Well, as you know, right now I'm a doctoral researcher in
Ooh, there we
in
go. Mhm.
artificial intelligence,
Mhm.
right? So it's something that I'm passionate about because I can see that it's a driving force. It's here. It's come to stay,
Yes.
right? And if you're not using artificial intelligence today in whatever you're doing, whether at home, at work, anywhere you are missing out. You are doing something wrong, you
And
know.
we're probably
But
doing too
again,
much when AI
e-
can do
e-
way more.
exactly. So we need to learn leverage,
Okay.
right? And that is a role, that I see myself playing,
Mhm.
right? Just leveraging the technology that is available and becoming that connector, like I said, bridging the gap,
Mhm.
and helping those who are not quite as, who do not understand how those algorithms and those data, how they all intertwine and tap in, and help them tap into the opportunities that are available, so that we can drive growth at scale within our community.
I love that.
Right.
I have one more question that just came from our conversation right now.
Sure.
So, some time ago, many years ago, I did an interview. No, I did a poetry reading, and an elderly lady came up to me afterwards, and she said, I'm just curious. What are your kids' names?" And Clement, I felt very exposed. Like it would say something about me that I was not willing to reveal. So I think I want to ask you, not about your kids' names. It's something you kept on saying, that we need to build big, bold businesses. And for me, I'm wondering, who are your role models? I feel like if you answer that question, it will have the same effect as when I said to her what my kids' names were. Like it reveals a part of you that is so instinctive you might not realize that it says a lot. So go for it. Who are your
Right.
role models?
That's a fantastic question, right? Again, as someone who's very in touch with my roots here and trying to connect that with making global impact. Um, um, when I first came here, I read a book, and in that book there was one person in that book that stood out, to me,
Hmm.
and I'm sure you will know who this person is.
Okay.
His name is Michael Lee Chin, right?
All right. Yes.
Right,
Is that
and this
Canadian,
guy is
Caribbean Canadian?
a Caribbean Canadian,
Hmm. Yes.
the only black Canadian billionaire today who
Yes.
braved all the odds of the system,
Yes.
shattered all the glass ceiling, to get to where he is, and
Yeah.
continues to give back, to the community, and did not disconnect from the Caribbean, setting up systems that folks can continue to leverage, to ensure that they are growing. So that's just one, but I think I would just share only that one today.
No, that says a lot. Thank you so much. That added a dimension, I think, just a personal dimension. It just really, it was the same thing. Like I felt, oh my gosh, how is it you discover me by asking me who my kids' names were? It was the same thing because your role models just absolutely show the mindset behind it, and it explains a lot about who you see yourself as and what you're trying to do in the world. That's what it does. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you, thank
What
you.
if you had said something like, "Oh my gosh, Hitler"? That would
No, no.
no. But thank you so much for sharing that, Clement, and thanks for being here today. Any parting words for perhaps new immigrants coming into a system that they might feel shut out of? Anything?
Well, again, we're here,
Yeah, great.
and good thing you're not the
Oh,
first to be here. Good thing you're not alone,
mm-hmm.
right? Tap into the system,
Yeah,
find out what's happening within your community,
yeah,
connect with your community organization, ask the right questions, and also know that even the maybe Eurocentric systems, that exist, but those systems are for you.
yeah,
Do not shy away, don't discount yourself from opportunities.
yeah,
Step into the space, own the space,
yeah,
but also understand the value of milestones. You have to start small and
yes,
build on it.
mm,
Nobody climbs the ladder from the top rung. You have to climb from the first rung. And just level setting and understanding that now I'm here, what is available for me, what value do I bring, because
mm-hmm.
life is all about value exchange, right?
Yes,
If you do not bring value to the table, then you do not get value. So
mm-hmm.
you need to know what value, and then most importantly, be very open to continuously polishing,
Yeah,
developing that value, because that
yeah.
is your most important asset,
Mm.
your value.
Thank you so much. That was so well said. That's a clip I'm gonna pull out, and we're gonna play it all over because it makes a lot of sense. But thank you for just accepting, like, when I reached out to you, because Ross had told me about you, and I was like, okay, yeah, for sure. Let's connect, and we had such a wonderful conversation. And I hope you do come back. Give us some updates on the BIPOC Foundation and anything else that you'd want to share with the community.
Right. No,
Yeah,
thank you so much, Lisa, for having me.
absolutely.
I'm hoping that someone was blessed today, with
Absolutely.
just with
Yeah.
just again, one more thing:
Mhm.
nobody owes you anything. You know,
Thank you. Let's say that
nobody
again to the people in the
nobody
back.
owes you
Nobody.
anything, but you have to work. You have to step out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
Nobody built the best versions of themselves from their comfort zone. So
Exactly.
I think I will leave with that.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, everybody, thank you for being here with me and Clement. I hope you did enjoy this interview and learned as much as I did, because it really was impactful and valuable. So thank you to our guest Clement, and we'll let him go enjoy the rest of Father's Day. Okay, the kids have been like, "Daddy, it's time." Like it's time. So we gladly oblige right now. See you next week for another inspiring interview on this Sunday interview from Basement Chronicles. I'm Lisa Dublin. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Bye. Take care.